Welcome to the Ask Dr. Renee show. I am your host, Dr. Renee. This show is here to motivate and inspire you to live the life you deserve. If this is your first time watching our show, some of our past guests have included Christine Bulwer of itsashort.com, Elvira Guzman of LVGPR, Shanti Das, the hip-hop professional of Press Reset Entertainment, Cupid, R&B singer, Dance Party King, Cupid Shuffle, Q-Robics, and Felicia Butterfield-Jones of WEEN, Women Empowerment and Entertainment Empowerment Network. You can catch all the old episodes on my website as well as youtube.com/AskDrRenee. Our guest tonight is Sheri Riley. Her resume includes her company Glue Inc., Exponential Living. She's a John Maxwell coach, a wife, mother, daughter, and a great sister friend. Welcome to the show, Sheri.
Hi, Dr. Renee. Hi, my friend. How you doing?
Great. We have a lot of ground to cover tonight, so let's get started.
All right.
Sheri, please share with us how you got into the entertainment industry.
Oh, goodness. Long story short, because we only have an hour. But I knew very early, I knew by 14, 15, that I wanted to work in the entertainment industry. And I am a woman of a certain age, so that was like, at that time, saying that I wanted to create hotels on Mars. I mean, because it was before there was this proliferation of what the entertainment industry is. There was no reality shows. Puffy hadn't done Making the Band, you know. And so it wasn't like you knew there was this industry behind the music, especially growing up in Kentucky. But I knew that's what I wanted to do, and I knew I wanted to be an entrepreneur. And as I just referenced, I'm from Kentucky and Ohio. And so when I went to college, I knew I wanted to be an entrepreneur. I knew I wanted to work in entertainment. And I spent the 5 years I was in college studying Billboard, not reading it, studying it. I studied Hollywood Reporter. I studied Variety. I studied at that time Impact Magazine and BRE. And every week for about 4.5 years, I would call anywhere between 10 and 25 record executives, film executives, entertainment executives. I'd send out about 50 email. Well, no, we didn't have email then. I'd send out about 50 resumes and cover letters that were actually typed. You know, the old, a typewriter.
On a typewriter, not a word processor.
On a typewriter. And I did that for about 4.5 years, and no one would take my call. In addition to that, I would manage the DJs on campus. I was the president of my sorority, Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated, so I did all of our parties. I was the president of the Minority Programming Committee, so I did all those events. So any and everything I could do to build my understanding of this industry. And so I went to the local radio stations and asked them to let me intern. Like, I literally asked them to let me work for free, and I still couldn't get a job. I could not get anyone to even let me work for free. And so my school, my college, University of Louisville, we had a radio station that no one in the African-American community knew about, because it was only on from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. They only played heavy metal and hard rock. And so I went to them and said, hey, like, none of the black students know you exist. Give me my own radio program. Like, you go off air at 5 o'clock anyway. So let me have a program from 5 to 9 called, I called it an evening extravaganza. And they were like, well, we don't have any urban music. We don't have any music, period, that you would even want to listen to. And I said, I got it. Like, if you give me the airtime, I'll do the rest. And I had absolutely no music, but because I'd been making those phone calls for 4.5 years, I now had a reason to talk to people. And so I started asking them to send me music. And that's when I first learned that was the industry standard, is record labels sent music to radio stations. And so I really started learning by just, this quote-unquote create the opportunity for yourself. And so I did that, created a tremendous buzz. I created my own T-shirts. I did flyers. Like, literally, I created this, movement on campus because nobody knew anything about our radio station. And from there, out of college, when I graduated, a funny story, Dr. Renee, I worked with a company in college that did the football classics, and they had a magazine. So I became the entertainment editor of the magazine. The first two people I interviewed Babyface and I interviewed Levert. And literally my first two jobs in the industry was working with Gerald Levert, and the second job was working for Babyface at LaFace. So that is literally the thumbnail on how I learned about the industry. And then when I graduated, I found a job in Cleveland. A gentleman I met told me, hey, if you get a job in Cleveland, you can intern with me. But I ended up working like 70, 80 hours a week, so I never got to intern with him. But I met Gerald Levert, and at that time, I knew everything about Sylvia Rhone. I wanted to be the next Sylvia Rhone, and so I literally walked up to him and was like, hey, I've been trying to get to Sylvia Rhone for 5 years. Like, can you get me to Sylvia Rhone? And he was like, yo, what do you do? And I told him marketing, and from there, it was like 6 months later, but him and Andy Gibson, the president of the company, gave me my first shot part-time doing marketing for Gerald and his stable of artists, and that's how I got into the industry.
Wow.
And that's literally
Please tell everyone what school you went to.
The University of Louisville in Louisville,
yes.
Kentucky.
Yes. That's quite a story. Quite a story. But you know what? It's that determination, and just like you said, you studied Billboard. That's just like, you know, people don't understand. I read credits after the movies, after the TV shows. I'm really focused on who these people are, because you never know. And that's kind of like the day I met Michael Malden. No one knew who he was, of course. He was in a mall, and he was just walking, and I said, excuse me, and he thought I was saying, excuse me, like you're in my way. I go, no, Mr. Malden, I'd like to speak to you, and I'm Dr. Renee, and he's like, you know who I am? I said, yes. So, and everyone's like, who's Michael Malden? I'm like, that's JD's father.
Right.
How did you know what he looked like, let alone his name? I said, well, when you study, you know these things. And everything, you know, a lot of people say that they say there's no such thing as luck. It's what is it? Consistency.
Preparation. Preparation means opportunity.
Opportunity. Exactly.
Yes,
and
that's it.
When you study, you know. Another quick story: when I met Oprah the first time when I was on her show, she was talking about her OBGYN and how wonderful she was, and I said, "Oh, Dr. Northrup." And people who watched the video were like, "How does she know who Oprah's doctor is?" And my sister's response, of course, was, "Well, she's Dr. Renee. Of course she knows." But yeah, you have to really be diligent. You have to really study, and you just have to keep going, because you could have gave up after the first day of sending out resumes, you know?
Oh my God! You know, a funny thing, when I did start working with Gerald, and again I was working part-time, and the vice president of promotions at Atlantic Records, where Levert was signed, was Richard Nash. And Richard would say to me in meetings, you know, I've known you for a long time. Like you've been doing some good things in the industry. Well, I was as green as the day is long. I was working part-time. I'd been at the company maybe 3 months. But the reason he thought he knew me was because my maiden name is Hughley. And so Sheri Hughley had been on his phone log, his message pad, for years. So he knew the name. So he thought, so instantly I got this credibility of like this high-powered executive with a vice president. And I mean, literally, I would sit in meetings with vice presidents who thought, because Richard said he knew me, but he didn't. He just knew my name had been on his phone log. So again, it took me from a quote-unquote, you know, intern working part-time. Within 3 months, I was sitting at the table with decision makers. Now, I had to then quickly step up and deliver at that level, and I was able to, one, you know, because I was stupid enough to think, hey, go do it, but more importantly, because I had studied. I mean, I knew so much about the industry before I got in the industry. Like, I knew where people, because I'd read the round table, which was where executives, they would talk about where they were working now, and I knew marketing strategies from artists that had been released, like, you know, over the course of those last 5 years. I had this wealth of information that gave me, the information. Information is king. I was so well informed that I sat there with these vice presidents and made major decisions, and I was literally working part-time. I didn't even have, like, materials.
That is funny. That is too funny. But I say fake it till you make it. But at the same time, do not get yourself in some sling that you can't get out of.
Right.
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 My whole thing is I'll say yes to a lot of things because I know who to call to make sure that I can get it done. So if I don't know, then I know who does know. So don't say, you can do it and then you have no resources.
Right. Right.
And I mean,
that's so
with
key.
the lovely Google now, it's a lot easier now for anybody to get an internship, to get in front of the right person. It's just a lot easier. And I think that, unfortunately, the generation, the millennials, as they call them, I don't think that they realize how easy they have it.
Oh, my God. We know the sad part is with the proliferation of information, they're actually lazier. Like, they have so much access to so much more, and they show up totally unprepared. And you like, how can you be unprepared and everything you need is a finger click away? Yet, prior to Google, I mean, we had to go find the information in magazines and books.
You had to go buy the magazines. You had to go buy the CDs. You had to,
Yeah. Like, I would go and read the credits on the back of CDs.
Exactly.
To know who produced this, who wrote it, what publishing house did it come from. I'd literally spend hours in record stores reading that. And now they can sit at a computer and they won't even do that part. So it's a different mindset.
Totally different. Totally different. So you get in the industry and then you decide to start your own company. So how did you start Glue Inc.? For women that are, go ahead. Tell me
I always knew that I was going to be an entrepreneur. So in college, my business electives were SBA classes, entrepreneur classes. And so I was at LaFace Records. I resigned when I left Trevel Productions, which is Gerald's management and production company. And LaFace called me, and I became the head of marketing there with my boss was Devette Singletary, God rest her soul. And I was responsible for the marketing for Usher, Toni Braxton, TLC, the 1996 Olympic album. But I always knew I was going to be an entrepreneur. And so after 3 years, I resigned, and I took about 10 months off. And later on, I'll talk to you about what that was all about. And during that time, I just really decompressed and allowed myself to really figure out and meditate on what my next move would be, and that was launching Glue. And Glue is 17 years old. It was 17 years in October.
Yay. Now, how did you come up with the name Glue? Let's start there.
One of the most creative individuals I've ever worked with, Derek Warfield, D.L. Warfield, gave me that name. So about 6 months before I resigned from LaFace, and I knew that I was going to leave with the idea of the company. And so I was talking to him about, what the company would do and what I wanted to create with the company. And so one day he was like, call it Glue. Not Glue Marketing, not Glue Entertainment, not Glue, just strictly Glue. And I'm like, okay, let me think about it. I had other names. When I was in college, I used to call it Careers Are Unlimited. And so one day I was talking to a soror and a good friend, Nikita Newell Hall, and at the time she was working, I think she was working at ICM at the time. And I was telling her, I was like, so it's kind of like, I'm this manager and not that I'm kind of like the one that really helps and kind of guides careers. And she's like, you're a manager. And I'm like, no. And I was like, no, it's kind of like I do the strategy, the branding. And she was like, oh, so you're an agent. I'm like, no. And I was like, see, I'm kind of like that thing in the middle that makes it all work, like the glue. And when I said it, when it came out of my mouth, I was like, that's it. That's the name. I told Derek one day I'll write him a check. One day I'll write him a check. But it stuck, and so the
no pun intended.
Well, actually, pun intended, because the original tagline was developing partnerships that stick.
Oh, I like it. I like it.
Yep, that was the original tagline.
That is pretty awesome. So tell everyone exactly what does Glue Inc. do for those that don't know.
Glue now, I mean, it's evolved as all
Right.
companies will do after 17 years, but we develop profitable partnerships for products and personalities. So still very true to the core as it relates to celebrity procurement and really working with corporations, brands, and individuals on their overall strategy and implementation. So we've always focused on how do we create partnerships and then how do we facilitate those partnerships through public relations, event consultation, celebrity procurement. So our clients range from Converse to BET Networks to Usher Raymond's Foundation to the National Basketball Association. So we've been able to really service our clients at the highest level for over 17 years.
That is pretty cool. For women out there who are working for a company and want to start out on their own, what advice do you have for them?
Women specifically?
Well, anyone really, I guess.
Okay. You know what? In this economy, the playing field has been leveled with the internet. You know, the startup costs are not as high, depending on your business. You know, naturally that's relevant to the business. But I would definitely, and this is that tried and true, is I would have at this point at least 9 months to a year of all your bills paid money. You know, and when I say all your bills, I mean not just your rent, your car note, gas. I mean your marketing budget, whether that's building, creating a website, whether that's business cards. That has to include the licensing, like your state license fees. That has to include, you know, you got to really make sure that all those things are in this, 9-month allocation of finances. Now, can you do it without that? Yeah. But the difference is, do you want to launch or do you want to build? And what's happened is a lot of people have launched companies with a minimum input, financial input. But in order to grow, sustain, maintain, you got to be able to get past that initial income rush. You got to be able to make it through when business decreases, when you got to go through a 4-month or 6-month business development period where sales may not be as high. And so, a lot of times companies don't fail because they have a great business idea and they're successful in the beginning. A lot of times they fail when that initial financial lull hits the business, and that is inevitable. I mean, it happens with all companies from Coca-Cola to Apple. You know what? Apple is the highest profit company in the world. They have like 187 billion in cash. I just heard that the other day. Like they are the number one profit or company in the world. And that says a lot because, one, they were almost out of business in that time period we all know of. And two, they have a very small market share. And I bring that up to say so many young entrepreneurs, new entrepreneurs, they want to do everything. They want to do everything versus what is the one thing that you can be known as the absolute best. Apple is known in their industry as the absolute best in user-friendly technology. They have the smallest market share. Like their market share is so small that hackers don't even fool with them. That's why there's no, the proliferation of antivirus like you have from Microsoft. But they're the highest profit company in the world. So the big advice outside of the financial I would give to upstarts and young entrepreneurs is really, really find your one thing. Don't try to come out the box with you got 15 services, you got 7 slashes on your business card, and then you're, a jack of all trade. What is it? A jack of all things, a trade, whatever that thing is. Right. Basically, you got too much going on, so I don't know what to hire you for.
Master of none.
Yeah, there you go. So those would be my 2 key pieces of advice.
Okay. I just want to remind everyone we will take questions. Please, if you're logged into Google+, that's how you have to ask the questions. In the upper right-hand corner, you'll see 9 little boxes. Click there. It'll say Q&A. Click Q&A, and then it'll drop down and it'll say Ask a Question on the right-hand side of your screen. And you can ask the question, and we will take the questions later. So that is very good advice. I totally agree. When people, you have to get focused. I've heard this from several people that have started companies, and they do end up doing many things. It's just you need to start with one and get
Yeah.
that going, and then move on to something else.
And you know, the thing is that most of us feel like, well, I could make money at this, I could be making money at this, and all that's true, but what will people know you to come to you for? And that's the biggest thing. It's not what you can't do or can do, and so you're trying to limit yourself. No, it's like if I don't know what to hire you for, then how do I know to come to you? In this market where everything is so busy, there's so many distractions, you want to know what people should actually hire you for. You know, you want to be very, very clear, and if you can't do that if you're sending multiple messages into the marketplace.
I agree. So now you have exponential living.
Yes.
So what is exponential living? Please explain how that concept and how it came to fruition, and the life coaching and speaking and.
Yes, well, exponential living is a lifestyle of pursuing peace, choosing clarity, and living courageously. And exponential living actually started when I was at LaFace. And but I've just, I guess, in the last 18 months, I call it phase 3. Well, LaFace was kind of the setup. Then Glue is phase 1, and exponential living is phase 2. But I began to really do exponential living when I was at LaFace working with Usher. And you had this young, 14, 15-year-old kid that I was responsible for his marketing. He had a dream. I got to LaFace Records because I had a dream. And I didn't really know the politics of the industry. I just knew, I'm a kid from the Midwest who's living her dream, and my job is to make sure my artists succeed. But I also felt this responsibility to my artists as people. I always felt like though I was paid to be the marketing person and be concerned with their brand, me, Sheri Riley, I was always concerned about who they were as the man, or the woman. And so a lot of, when I resigned from LaFace, I met with Usher and I met with Janetta, and I told him I could never work with him. And, at first he didn't, for years he didn't understand it. And, most people wouldn't, because why would anybody leave a company to start a company and not take a great, great client, to work with them? But, I'm a woman of faith, and I was very clear that my purpose in his life was more than just being a marketing person. It was to work with him on his personal development and how he made decisions and how he dealt with conflict and just how he matured as a person. Not calling it exponential living. I just knew that was my purpose. And then when I started Glue, at the very beginning of Glue, I was very clear that Glue was a bridge and a foundation to what I was really supposed to do, which was exponential living. Still didn't call it that, but I was very clear that I was supposed to work with influencers and high achievers on how to stop spending 100% of their time on 10% of who they are. How do you not only just go after success, but how do you live with that success? And so I knew that was my journey. And then when it was time to really transition into exponential living, what I found as my own story and the truth of so many other people that I worked with was that we had this great life. At LaFace, I was living my dream. I had a high 6-figure income. I had an unlimited expense account. I was traveling all over the world. I worked with the biggest artists in the world. I had access. I had resources. And I was miserable. I was miserable. I mean, I loved my job. I loved what I did. But my hair was falling out. I had no peace. I was so stretched. I was so burnt out. I was so stressed that the core of who I was overweight. I wasn't healthy. I wasn't taking care of myself. Now I had money, but I didn't have a good life. And so I knew that we could have a good life and have good success, but there was going to be some choices we had to make. And I've learned and I've grown, because I'm my very first client, is that when we choose to pursue peace, it gives us the clarity to make the choices that will allow us to have a good life, but we can only make those choices through courage. It takes courage for me to leave a company, leave a six-figure income, tell one of their top artists, no, we won't work together. It takes courage to make those kind of choices. But 20-some years later, we have a great friendship. I launched Exponential Living and what Exponential Living and how it can serve others through working with him at that time, not even knowing it was what I was called to do as an occupation. I just knew it was the right thing to do. But it also allowed me, that courage allowed me to understand really what I'm purposed to do. And that is to serve as a personal development coach, leadership coach, and life strategist. And what that is working with high achievers who get to that place where they're not clear anymore. Like they had a goal, whether it's to get in the NFL or whether it's to get a successful recording career or become an actor or actress or become vice president, become a multimedia personality. They get to that goal and then they go, what's next? I accomplished this goal, but now what's next? Or now what? Like, I'm good. Like, what else am I going to do? I'm burnt out. This doesn't really fulfill me. I'm 25 and I've reached my goals. I'm 35 and I want to be married or have children. Or you get to that place where you're like, is this it? That's how I was. Once I finally reached, working at a record label, I was like, okay, I'm good. Like, I'm 27 years old and I've reached my goal. I thought it would take me to 40, but I'm here, and so now what do I do? And to have a life strategist that's able to work with you and help you walk through your own clarity, because as my dear friend and my mentor Les Brown says, it's hard to see yourself when you're in the picture frame. And so when you're in your own picture, it really helps to have someone outside of that picture frame to just ask you the right questions to help you get your own clarity for that which you already know, but you just need a little help finding it out for yourself.
That is the best explanation I've ever heard of a life coach, life strategist ever. And it's funny that you mentioned that because, one, when I graduated medical school, I said to my mother, now what do I do?
Yep.
My entire life was, Renee's going to be a doctor, Renee's going to be a doctor. So then I walked across the stage and I said, okay.
Now what?
Now what? Because my whole life, everything I did was trying to get to be a doctor. My classes in school, the extracurriculars, everything was to prepare for that. So now what do I do with my life? Like, I'm here, so now what?
Yeah.
And I literally asked that, and people thought I was crazy. And I said, no, this is a problem. I have nothing to look forward to, nothing to work towards. Why am I getting up in the morning? I'm not working on anything. Like, I've achieved the goal, and that was it, and I'm done. Like, what do I do now? And it's funny you said that because that seriously happened to me, and I just was like, whoa.
And it's so common. It's so common. And it's so devastating for some people. I mean, because some people, I know your support system. I mean, you have a solid support system with your family. Imagine someone who is 24, 25, they're the #1 recording artist in the world, and people are looking at them like, what do you mean you're not happy? What do you mean you don't know what you want to do? You got the world at your feet. You got all the money you could want. Well, money doesn't buy peace. Money doesn't buy clarity, nor happiness. And it doesn't buy clarity. It doesn't buy peace, and it doesn't buy clarity. And it's really hard to get that kind of insight from your inner circle. If they're either on your payroll or their family. So that's another reason a life strategist is so important, because they're outside of your inner circle. And here's the thing about, coaching, and I call it life strategy, but with coaching is there has to be a rapport. I mean, there's so many coaches, and there's so many good coaches out there. Some of them are coaches because they're, they've been transitioned out of their current employment, and then there's some that this is really what they're called to do, and then there's some that they just have, great insight. But it's all about the rapport as well. You got to find someone who understands your journey, but there also has to be that rapport. And I only work with a few people from a coaching standpoint. The ready, the willing, and the committed. And also, do we have that rapport? And again, I'm a woman of faith, but am I ordained to be the person that can be used to help them be guided through the process. Because coaching is not mentoring, it's not teaching, and it's not advocating. You know, teaching is I teach you what I know. Advocating is I give you something that you need to help open this door. Mentoring is like I got advice that can help you through the process. But again, all of those things mean it's in me and I'm giving it to you. Coaching says everything you need is in you. I'm able to help to guide you to bring it out.
That's cool and very important.
Yeah.
Very important, especially when you get to a level where you have a bunch of yes people and nobody is telling you the honest to goodness truth. So I can understand where it's definitely necessary. It's also funny you mentioned Les Brown. I'm sure you remember. So 2 years ago, Sheri invites me to this call with Les Brown, and I was like, oh, this is so cool. And it was a call. I'm like, great. So I get on the call. It was only like 30 of us. And he talked and talked and talked, and then he said, okay, I'll take questions. And I was texting my friend that was also on the call, and he was like, you can ask a question? I was like, I'm trying to think of something. And he's like, well, I'm not going to ask anything. And then I go, no, I'm going to ask. And then I did. I said, okay, I figured it out. And I couldn't believe it. He took my question. He was so nice. You recorded the call, so I actually have that soundbite for my keepsake forever and ever. I even posted what he said to me on my website as a testimonial. He said he sees great things in me, and I was like, this man has talked to me for all of 2 seconds. How does he know? But he was wonderful. I remember I got off the phone call. My mother said I just spoke to Les Brown. She said, how did you do that? And she's like, but he was talking to a bunch of people. I go, no. He was talking to Dr. Renee, and he told me this. And she's like, okay. And so I don't even know if I ever played her the audio, but yeah, it was funny. But and it was just amazing. And actually, I emailed him. He emailed me back. I was just elated. So thank you to you for that, because that was in the beginning of a big transition for me, and it has really, I've kept it in the back of my mind, and it's really helped me to keep moving forward. So I really do appreciate that. So Exponential Living, it just sounds so amazing. And then, so how does John Maxwell fit in with that?
Well, John Maxwell is one of my mentors. I'm actually one of the founding partners of the John Maxwell team. There's almost 5,000 of us around the world, so it is a global community, but it's a very close-knit community. And John is, oh my God, like, he has been a heaven sent for me because he's such a humble man, such a powerful man, such a focused man, such an accomplished man. But as he puts it, he walks slowly through the room. And what that means is, everywhere he goes, he's never above anyone. And that was very refreshing for me, spending, my entire adult life in the entertainment industry and being around a lot of people that the world puts them on a pedestal, but they don't really have power. And here's someone who genuinely has global influence. Inc. magazine, he's the #1 leadership business expert in the world, according to Inc. magazine. And he is powerful, but his power comes from serving. His power comes from what he wants to bring value to you versus what you're supposed to do for him. And so at a time in my life where I'd spent, so much of my career in the entertainment industry, it just really helped mold me in the sense of how I really, really know I'm supposed to serve. It kind of like gave me a stamp that I wasn't crazy, that I have this heart to serve people. I have this heart to help people be better people. I have this desire to help people get to where they're destined to be. The things that I've done with, like I said, with Usher, or with Dalvette Quince, who's the one of the lead trainers on NBC's Biggest Loser, Rashawn Ali, who's a multimedia personality on Headline News and CBS Sports. I've had this distinctive and honor of just being there and being a catalyst for their clarity that's allowed them to really elevate in their career and in their personal development. But coming from the entertainment industry, where the world says the light should be on you, And so being exposed to John, him being a mentor, me working very closely with him, me being able to listen to him in person twice a year speak, and hearing him on calls, 3-4 times a year, it really matured me in how I lead, because now I understand leadership is nothing more than influence, as he says. It's not the one who has the most money. It's not the one who has the most exposure. It's not the one who has the most attitude. It really is, how many people do you influence? And how do you influence them for them to be better, not for you to shine? And that was a great, great maturity for me in working closely with him. So it's been my honor to be one of the founding partners of his team. And it's an honor to be able to take his leadership principles, incorporate them in exponential living, and really grow my brand and my message.
We have a question from Teresa Mask. Where does that courage come from that you had to leave, LaFace to do Glue Inc.? And what was Usher's initial reaction when you told him?
Well, I'll start with the second one. His initial reaction was, it was disappointment, because literally it was right at the beginning of You Make Me Wanna. And I wouldn't leave until I set up the album. But with the disappointment, because he knows I'm a woman of faith, because he knows how much I do things in prayer, he was very supportive. Like, he understood. He genuinely understood that this is what I needed to do and what I was purposed to do. And like I said, at first he didn't understand why I wouldn't work with him. It took about 5 years, and he hit a very critical place in his life. And because I was there, we were able to really walk him through that critical place, and that's when he really understood it, because I wasn't on the payroll. I didn't know what was going on with all the business. I mean, at the end of the day, I genuinely just loved Usher, period. Not Usher Raymond, not the artist, just the person. And so it gave him a place where he could really mature from a kid to a young man, from a young man to an adult. Now, the second part of that question, how do I get that courage? Again, as a woman of faith, prayer is everything for me. It's nothing that I do in and of my own strength. But what I've found is when I really seek God in prayer, and when I'm open to really receive the answer, even when I don't understand it, trust in the Lord with all thine heart and lean not into thine own understanding. He has always delivered. He has always delivered. I mean, he has always, without fail, delivered. And I've been willing to take the bumps along the way. The courage wasn't from a place of everything has gone great. Far from it. I've taken more bumps and bruises than I have victories. But I found every bump and bruise was so much value. They say we grow with the bad things. That's where the real maturity comes. And so the courage comes from prayer, and the courage comes from knowing that every lesson learned is a value to keep moving me from glory to glory.
So what was the 10 months you did? You said you were going to tell us later, the 10 months between Levert and LaFace?
Yeah, well, between LaFace and Glue.
Oh, LaFace and Glue.
Yeah, between LaFace and Glue. And like I said, I was so burnt out. I mean, I was burnt out. I traveled so much. My dad and my bonus mom were driving from Cincinnati, Ohio to Atlanta to come visit me. And I gave them the directions, right? What do? You give them, again, pre-Google, so
right.
There was no GPS and maps,
right.
And right, so I'm giving them, yeah. So I'm giving them the directions to my apartment. And my dad calls me, and he's like, Sheri, I thought you was going to give us the directions to your apartment. And I was like, well, Daddy, I did. He said, no, baby, you gave us the directions to the airport. We're at the airport. That's how much I was traveling. I instinctively gave him directions to the airport, not to my apartment. Oh, my gosh. And so when I knew it was time to resign, I also knew that I had to take a moment and really decompress. Like, I had to really allow myself to, you know, for lack of a way to put it, just get that smell off of me. You know, how we can just jump into something else. And I'm talking now about, you know, LaFace, but I mean, it could be relationships, it could be jobs, you know, it could be a lot of things that we just jump from one thing to the other because we don't have the courage to just stop for a minute. Because we fear, oh my God, if I don't go after another job, I'll never be employed again. Or if I don't get right back in the dating scene, you know, I'll never date again. And the reality is so much of what has established me 20 plus years later was those 10 months. During those 10 months, I would never forget this. I went home. I went home to Kentucky to spend time with my mom. And my aunt said, it's so good to have you home and really talk to you. And I found that really funny because I'm like, I come home 2-3 times a year. And she was like, yeah, but when you come home, you were always doing something else. And that was such an eye-opener for me. It was my first lesson in the difference between being present, meaning just being in someone's presence, and actually being present. Because so many times, and it's such a valuable lesson now with me having children, there's so many times that we're actually in a person's presence, but we're really not present. And it's a struggle. I mean, I fight with it every day, you know, with my husband, with my children, with my mom. And, you know, sometimes I lose the battle because I just, you know, there's commitments that I'm trying to meet and deadlines I'm trying to meet. But I try to be as conscious of it as possible. And then sometimes you just doggone tired, you know, you just want to shut it down.
Right.
But it's many of those. I could share many great lessons that established the foundation that I'm still standing on just by taking that time. You know, my dad thought I was having a nervous breakdown because I quit my job, I bought a house, all in the same time. So I literally, like, the day I resigned, like, I closed on my house the next day. My last day at LaFace was the same day I moved into my house. My dad was like, who does that? Like, who quits their job and buys a house all at the same time? Like, you've lost your mind. But I also set myself up because the first, I guess the first 3 or 4 years, I built out my basement and I ran glue I had an entire area in my home that was my office. And so I was still in tune with my next steps.
Oh, that's pretty amazing. I was going to say, what did your parents think? Because my parents would have been like, you're leaving a 6-figure, have you lost it completely?
Yeah. Well, you know, the crazy thing is my dad didn't know my dad had no idea what I was doing. Like, I never told my dad I wanted to work in entertainment because for him, that was drugs, sex, and rock and roll. So, you know, that didn't make sense. Like, you going to college, you working on a degree, you going to do what? And out of college, when I graduated, I had job offers, you know, like at that time, you know, nice paying job offers. And then my dad lived in Cincinnati, so his whole thing is come to Procter & Gamble. And so it never made sense to him how I could turn down jobs making $60,000, $70,000 out of college to go to Cleveland and get a job making $20,000 an hour. I mean, $20,000 a year, lose that job and I got another job at a record store making $3.45 an hour. At Trevel, I was making like $4 an hour, you know, and he was like, I don't understand it. And then even when I worked at LaFace and I'm making 6 figures and he would come and see this building and, you know, he was still like, I don't know what y'all doing here. He's like, I mean, literally when I was at LaFace for 3 years, he was like, I don't know what you're doing, but you haven't asked me for money. So, you know, whatever. Like, I mean, literally probably maybe 3 years before my father passed, we were sitting at the kitchen table and he said, will you please help me understand what it is you do? And this was 7 years ago because my dad had been deceased 4 years. It was like 3 years before he passed. So that's literally deep into my career. And he was like, can you just help me understand what you do? Because I still don't know what it is that you do.
That is too funny. That is too funny. So you mentioned it a little bit, but you're married, you have children, you're an entrepreneur, everything many of us want, like myself. So one day, Sheri sat me down and gave me a talking to like only a big sister could. And I didn't get upset. And I wasn't defensive either, was I?
No,
I
you
wasn't
weren't.
defensive.
No, you were very receptive.
I
Yes.
listened to everything she said. So I see, as she does remember. So
Mm-hmm.
basically, she told me that I wasn't giving any time to my personal life, and that is why it was not flourishing.
Yes.
So, and I did make moves on that, and so one day, hopefully, it'll all pay off. But so,
Yes.
what would you tell my friends who are just like me, who are moving up the ladder, and they still don't have any kids, they're not married, they're really not dating? What would you tell them?
Stop spending 100% of your time on 10% of who you are. And what does that mean? That means you have to make room in your life. You literally, and again, it goes back to that courage question. It goes back to that courage question. Will you have the courage to make room in your life? And when I say make room, I mean there's so many women and men, but we're talking specifically now for women. They'll say, oh, well, I'm not dating anybody, so it's okay that they're, working 60 hours, 70 hours a week, and they're volunteering at their church, and they're active in their community, and, and I say to them, but there's no room. Because even if a guy was interested in you, he's looking at your life going, where would I fit? Where would I fit? Or you're so busy, he could be sitting right there in front of you, but you just whipping past him like, what's that Tasmanian devil? Like you just,
Right.
or you're just so caught up in your own thoughts that your face is never welcoming. And let me tell you what I mean when I say that. I know someone very close to me, and they always have a scowl, this right here on their face.
Scowl.
And a part of it is just because they're always focused. They're an entrepreneur. They're trying to get this done. They're trying to get that done. But that's how they walk around all the time. I mean, if they walk in with their friends, if they're walking in the restaurant, if they're at Kroger, wherever they are. And so the reality is the men around them don't know that they're thinking about, how they're going to make payroll or, how they're going to make this deadline. All they see is this beautiful woman who has this scowl. What is it? Scowl, yes, of their face. And so there's never this welcoming energy that says, hey, just come talk to me. And then there's times when a gentleman does approach and they're so, caught up in their own thoughts, they immediately come off kind of abrasive, like, what is it? So that's the first interaction, So it's like, take that guard down, keep your arms from being folded, keep a smile on your face. That's the automatic healing for this constant here. Just, put that smile on your face because it just opens up everything. So make room, the simple thing of just smile. And then the last thing is change your picture. Meaning, so many of us take a blank canvas and we paint a picture on it. And then we expect a man to come fit into our picture. And what I would challenge each of us to do is take your picture off, have a blank canvas, and just allow yourself to be open to the process. Now, it doesn't mean you don't have, dreams and hopes and guidelines and, ideas of what you would like him to be. I mean, we've got to have standards. We've got to have those things. But at the end of the day, nobody can fit into something that you've tightly created. Allow yourself to come into this dating environment with just a blank canvas and just be open to the picture that dating allows you to create.
Now, on the flip side of that, to the married women with families like
Mm-hmm.
yourself, how do you balance entrepreneurship, which is totally different than just having a job, and your family?
Well, first of all, I don't believe in balance. Because and any mother can attest to this. Like if I'm in a meeting downtown, 20 miles, 30 miles from my daughter's school, and my daughter gets sick, there's no way to balance that. I'm either going to leave the meeting or I'm going to go pick up my child. There's no balance there. What I do believe in is integration. How do we fully integrate? And there's some choices we have to make. Right now, I wanted to go to Los Angeles for the Grammys. I mean, I wanted to. There were some key meetings that I was setting up. But my husband is traveling during that time, and one of us needs to be here with our children. So I'm not going. So I am, my husband and I and myself, I've created what's my, what I call like my priority list. It's God, it's me, it's my husband, it's my children. And so I filter my choices and my decisions through that. And as you can see, I put me after God, because that's what the word says. Love your neighbor as you love yourself. And a lot of times, especially for women, we make us, the woman, the wife, the mother, last. And then we are completely exhausted, we're completely drained, and we're trying to give our family everything they need from the fumes that we have left, versus making sure that we're fulfilled so that we're giving from our overflow. Because what's going to be more impactful to your children, your fumes or your overflow? I mean, it's very easy, and I know we've all heard this, put the mask on yourself so you can save your children. If you try to put the mask on your child first, both of y'all die. And so I'm very conscious. Again, some days I win, some days I don't. Some days I'm good, some days I'm not. But then I try to make sure that the time that we do spend, that I'm focused on them. And again, sometimes I win, sometimes I don't. But it's always my intention. I try to have real conversations with both of my daughters. I try to spend quality time with my husband. And I try to make sure I spend time with my mom, and, in addition to the priorities that come with the company. And it's calendared. My mentor, Michael Hyatt, says what gets done is what's on your calendar. And so if you look at my calendar, I have on there the time that I spend playing with my daughter. I have on there the time that I do something with my 16-year-old. I have on my calendar when I'm going to sit down with my mom. Like, I don't just leave it to, it's going to happen because I love them. No, because everything is going to get pushed in. I have on my calendar when I go to the gym. Those things I literally put on my calendar, not because I need a reminder, but because if I don't calendar it, I risk it not getting done at the level that I want it done. So we kind of think, well, it's your family. You won't not do that.
That is interesting. Teresa Mascom said that was deep. Your fumes or your overflow. I like that. I like that analogy too. That was very good. And I agree. If it's not in the calendar, I don't have to do it. That's what I say.
You forget. It's like 24 hours. The day will pass, and you're like, oh my God, I meant to talk to my mom. Or oh my God, I meant to do this with my daughter. Oh my God, so it's not that the intention isn't there. It just makes it visible. And thank you, Teresa, the fumes of the overflow. Thank you.
So how do you define true leadership? And I mean, working with Les Brown and John Maxwell, I know that you probably have a really great answer for this.
Yeah, nothing original, because I truly believe what John says, that leadership is nothing more than influence. Influence of money. I used to say this when I worked at LaFace. I used to say the person who leads is the person who has influence over the people and the money. And when I would say that when I worked at LaFace, because here I was, relatively new to the company, and it was a very young company when I got there. And again, I was very green. I mean, when I came into a very high level position, and wasn't quote unquote a high level executive yet. I grew into one very quickly, but immediately I had a leadership role. And I had a leadership role because I was astute enough to be very effective with multi-million-dollar budgets, and I was very astute at building great relationships with the staff, with the artists, and with my bosses. And so I began to really recognize that I could make things happen at the highest level because of the influence I had over budgets and because of the influence I had over people. I was able to stop things that I didn't believe in, that were better things that the artists could do and not do. And so I began to really understand that working at LaFace. But then, 20-some years later, now being working with John Maxwell, to hear him say leadership is nothing more than influence, it just really kind of confirmed, being that he's the #1 leadership expert in the world, it confirmed what I'd always kind of known from my experiences in LaFace. And then I would just add, I would say leadership is also being able to effectively serve. You know, I go to Victory World Church, and Montel Williams is a pastor there, and yesterday he preached a sermon on leadership, and leadership being the power of serving and service. And you know, you interviewed my sister, my dear friend, you know, Shanti Das, and you know where Shanti is in her career, her leadership now is rooted in service. Yeah. And what she's genuinely doing from a philanthropic endeavor. I mean, you have Bill Gates, you know, who transitioned from Microsoft with the Bill and what's his Melinda Gates Foundation, and I mean, yes, he's sitting on billions of dollars, but there's such a servant heart there. You know, there's such a servant heart, and when you really look at individuals like him that are making world significant difference, there's a servant heart there, because there's so many people that have money, there's so many people that have, you know, access, but they're not leaders. You know, they're not leaders. They may have a lot of followers, but they're not necessarily leaders. And so I look at those three things: service, servanthood, influence over money, and influence over people.
And what is your definition of success?
Peace. You know, that bottom line. Can I read what I sent out on Instagram today? Okay. Today, it's so funny you asked this question, because and it's so interesting. I can say that to you now. That would not have been my answer for many, many years leading up to now. For many years, especially in high school, college, LaFace, Glue, success to me was very different. But I've matured enough where I've, you know, like the Bible says, I've had plenty and I've had nothing. And in either instance, the only thing that mattered to me was peace. The only thing. So Denzel said, success, question mark. I don't know what that word means. I'm happy. But success, that goes back to what's in someone else's eyes. So what somebody else says success is. For me, success is inner peace. That's a good day for me. And I literally saw that from Chris Hicks. Thank you, Chris. And I reposted it, not knowing that Dr. Renee was going to ask me that question. But that's, I mean, when I say my entire drive since I left LaFace, and since I had the money, the access, the accolades, the awards, you know, I did all these great things, and I had no peace. That's when my journey of exponential living, pursuing peace, choosing clarity, and living courageously began, because I realized I wasn't the only one. There's so many people that have what the world calls success, and they're miserable. And all they really want is peace. Peace is the new success. And peace isn't something you can buy. Clarity isn't something you can buy. And so that for me is success, is being able to pursue peace, choose clarity, and live courageously.
And on that note, thank you so much for joining us this evening. Please tell everyone what can we do to support you? You know, what do you have coming up?
Well, I thank you so much, Dr. Renee. This has been my purpose and my pleasure. You know, to support you is always a plus for me, my dear friend. I would love for your audience to follow me on Twitter at Sheri Riley, SHERI, It's the same for Instagram. And I would love for you to go to my website, again, Sheri Riley, and sign up for my blog, sign up for my newsletter.
They're very good, I must say.
Thank you. Thank you. I would love for your audience to please come join my Exponential Living community. And I will be speaking at Steve Harvey's Act Like a Success conference. This is his first one, March 6th through the 8th. So I'm actually speaking on March 7th. And it's in Reston, Virginia. But would love is actlikeasuccessconference.com. So for any of your audience that's really looking to hear some great speakers and get served in a high level on, you know, what it is to really get that full scope of success, which is peace and money and access, you know, and all of the fullness of what we can deem as success. That's going to be a great conference for that insight.
Oh, that sounds like that's going to be wonderful. March 7th would have been my grandmother's 90-something birthday. I can't remember right now, but yeah.
Oh, wow.
But thank you, everyone, for watching and asking questions. This show is here to motivate and inspire you to live the life that you deserve. I hope that we have motivated and inspired at least one of you. Please feel free to comment or email me how the show has helped you. And if you have anyone that you think that I should talk to because you are motivated or inspired by them, please let me know. And remember, if you have any questions, ask Dr. Renee. And that's my website, askdrrenee.info, my YouTube channel, my Twitter, Pinterest, Instagram, everything is Ask Dr. Renee. Good night.
Good night.